Tell us a little bit more about this research fellowship. What was that about? How, and any information you can
Yeah,
share about that.
yeah, sure. So I got involved in this very special medical mission that I have honored to be part of it since 2015. It's a mission that people from the University of George Washington comes in, like cardiologists. Um, they place pacemakers and defibrillators in patients who are underserved in Honduras. Um, we don't have a lot of electrophysiologists in my country. We only have one actually for the whole country. So part of the program they sponsored me was to train me about pacemakers and defibrillators. So I started my research fellowship for a year. I was funded by the Heart and Vascular Institute, and I got my support from the GW people. And I will train. It was like a very complex program because I was doing research, but as well I was doing training in pacemakers and defibrillators for a year. And also, I was very dedicated to the fellowship, so I took every opportunity that I had. So I went to the lectures, the cardiology fellows went, all of them for a year. I also went to the internal medicine lectures. I went to the medical school lectures for a year as well because, English is not my native language. So I wanted just to get a hold of the language as much as I can. So I was doing that for a year. That was in 2016, 17. I started like in July, almost like 1 year and half month. I was there at George Washington University. However, people used to think that just because I did the research fellowship, that will give me like a success path for my match at GW, but it wasn't that easy because um, the program is very competitive, even for American graduates, and even for IMGs, they don't take a lot of IMGs either.
Okay.
So, so it was a very competitive. So that year when I finished, I was still being part of the mission with the people from the George Washingtons, and because I was so grateful that they taught me uh, like cardiac devices, like pacemaker and defibrillator, just basically how to interrogate these devices and do follow-ups on
Um,
patients. I decided back in Honduras to start like this pacemaker clinic by myself. So I started doing all the follow-ups for the patients that they have been going to Honduras since 2010, and no one gave follow-up to these patients since then. They went there every year, but nobody used to follow up these patients. So I started to, get their personal numbers, call all these patients, assign them, appointments to them. So I started to do this after I finished my research fellowship. That's what I've been doing back and forth, going back to Honduras and then going back to Washington, continue to do some work with them and then just work in the clinic. And you know how things work in our country. For IMGs, we do a lot of medicine and primary care. So I not only focus on giving these patients like a follow-up for their pacemakers and defibrillators, but I also give them like a primary care consult because sometimes for these patients, they're the only doctor that you see for the whole year.
wow, amazing. That's really amazing. I mean, your efforts were like, kind of humanitarian, and then there was research based, and of course, like clinical based. So you kind of just like combined all of it together. And I'm sure that that experience just made you certainly helped you grow as a physician, and certainly helped you, improve your chances of getting into a residency
Yes.
at the same place where you did your research.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's very interesting because I did all of that in 1 year, and part of my program was to publish a book. So we
Yeah.
published a book during that year. I was very lucky to get the support from a lot of my mentor. I still get it. But the real story is that even though everything sounds so nicely, this is the second time I apply. I applied last year. I actually was very confident that I had a very strong application, so I only applied to it's very small programs, like very high top programs, and I didn't match.
Hmm.
So of course, when you don't match like the first time, it's obviously very depressing and stressful. You don't know what else to do. You don't know if you're want to try it once again. But then I got the support from my mentors once again, and we decided that it wasn't like the best application because I didn't apply properly. I didn't apply to several programs, and I decided like, well, I can always improve my application.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
I think that's the
And,
key. Sorry to cut you off. Sorry, Dr. Ed. It's when people, and thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate your candidacy and just letting people know that, there's a failure. What you do is you reevaluate yourself during a failure and make sure you realize what it was the problem was. Whether or not somebody was pushing you unduly to take an exam when you weren't ready, or you weren't honest with yourself about your actual application and what else you could have done differently. And you were very lucky to have some amazing mentors that were stateside, like in the U.S., right? A lot of people don't have that. And what Dr. Ed and I always say is if you don't have U.S. mentors, connect with us, because this is why we're here, to provide this mentorship that you just may not get unless you're lucky enough to do what you are doing. And that's just your goal should be like wherever you're mentoring or wherever you're like volunteering is to end up there, because you made contacts, you had personal relationships, and they were like rooting for you. They were
yeah.
helping you, and this is why you are where you are. And I cannot express how important that is, that people get rotations or externships and places that have residency programs, and you endear yourself to those programs, and then they kind of pull you through.
I agree.
Absolutely. I mean, right now, in my opinion, after exams and exam scores, it's really this networking and this connections that you can make, with mentors and other colleagues. I really think that's what really, nowadays helps one at least get into an interview and then improve your chances of matching. The observerships and all, that's all perfectly fine, but it's like, what do you do in those weeks of observership, and if you're not able to develop a good connection, a good rapport with your attendings, then it's not, it just looks good on CV, on paper, but it's not really helpful, I would think.
I agree with you. Actually, that was the things that I evaluated when I did a match. I felt like, what else can I do? Because I already did like a research fellowship. I already have publications. But when I was in working in the U.S., I always thought that my work will speak out for me. And instead of reaching out to people and ask them for help, I thought that it wasn't something I was supposed to do. But then I started networking, and actually that's something that really helped me through. I was very lucky to, I started applying to different things. I actually, around last year, I was awarded with the Young Physician Award of 2018. So that for that conference, I was able to know a lot of people. I was introducing myself. And actually, I met a lot of people that now at this point gave me some rotations. I actually went to the University of Wisconsin back down in November just by networking with some people who work in radiology and sending me emails and saying that I was like very interested in getting rotations and getting out there. And actually I was there for 2 months doing a rotation in cardiology, internal medicine rotation, and I actually got a letter from, so every time when I went to a rotation, I was like, what can I get from this rotation? Not only to put it on my CV, but also like get publication, get mentorship, or get new exposure, and also cases that I can publish. So those are
Yeah.
kind of the things that I look into it. So I was very lucky, and I actually got a new mentor now in University of Wisconsin.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Now the letters. So you got your letters from the at the research fellowship. Your mentors from the with whom you did your research. Is that how you got your letters?
Yes. So part of my letters, 3 of them were from my mentors. from where I did my research fellowship. Another one of my letters were from people that I met from this conference. I started
Absolutely.
working with them on research. I started like writing emails. It is
Yeah.
amazing because when you start writing these emails, you write like 400 emails and probably just three of these people write you back. But I was lucky enough to hear from a lot of people that I met. So one of them was from this mentor that actually he's from um, the Hispanic community. He's like a very strong member for the Hispanic community. So he guided me through this, and he also worked with him and gave me a letter. And the other one is again another person that I met at this conference, and I started working with him and publishing like health policy columns and also like papers. So we published a lot. So he gave me another letter as well.
Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Ed from Ed for Med. It's a great honor to have Dr. Chavez, who's one of a medical graduate who matched this year. Congratulations. Also with me is Dr. Data from Residency Success. Dr. Data, how are you doing?
I'm doing so well considering the fact that we're in the age of COVID-19. We're all healthy, thankfully, well for the most part. Unfortunately, I had a friend pass away today of COVID-19. And it's a very real and unreal place that we're in, Dr. Ed, right now. But we have to celebrate the win. This is why we're here. We're here to celebrate the win who wants to match success for some of the candidates. And as you know, Residency Success, we have the same goal in helping you basically match and guiding you through it.
For those of us, who haven't really been following us, I run Ed for Med, and Dr. Data runs Residency Success, and both of us have a very similar aim of trying to pass on information to medical graduates, up-to-date information, and we keep brainstorming different strategies to help improve chances for medical graduates to get into residency. So let's go on to Dr. Chavez. So tell us about yourself. Where did you do your med school from, and when did you decide about you want to pursue a U.S. residency?
Wonderful. So thank you for this opportunity. So I'm from Honduras in Central America. I graduated at the beginning of 2016. I decided that I wanted to do residency when I was in 4th year of medical school. I haven't decided yet where I wanted to do my residency, and it was until I graduated I had the opportunity and exposure to work with some Americans back down in my country that actually asked me, like, now that you have graduated, what are you planning to do? And I said, like, I always wanted to pursue an internal medicine residency. The place I wasn't sure about it because I never had family here in the U.S. I never knew any doctors here in the U.S., so I wasn't planning on coming here in the U.S. in the first place. But it was that experience that I had with working with medical mission from people from Washington that it was the one who introduced me to the possibility that I can do my residency here in the U.S.
Amazing. Now, do you, so I'm sure you're aware that, for international medical graduates, these specialties like internal medicine, family medicine, pathology, those are some, I'm going to use the word, easier to get into. Do you think that also played a factor into your decision to pursue, residency training in the U.S.?
I feel like I always been very passionate about internal medicine. I never thought about any other area. I do believe that we're lucky, if we call it like that, to say that it's less competitive than other specialties such as surgery or radiology. But yeah, I mean, I always wanted to do internal medicine, so.
So it worked out. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me about, so when did you take your step 1, step 2 CK and CS?
Yes. So I feel like I wasn't aware how the system worked when I started the process. I didn't have like any guidance, so I think that's the main reason why I always try to help foreign medical graduates, because I think it's very important for you to read how the process and how important it is to prepare for this, because your step one and all these exams matter. So if I always tell them every time they ask me for advice, I always say that I took all my steps in 1 year, almost less than 7 months. I didn't took any lectures like Kaplan or anything. If they ask me what else I will do different, I will, take more preparation. The only thing is like my mentors who were at the hospital, they were saying that I was so prepared to take all these tests, so I took them all at once. But clearly, my score are not competitive as other candidates, so I took them in less than almost 7 months, all my steps. School. Yeah.
I just want to chime in here and say that that's amazing. That takes a lot of dedication and a lot of fortitude. And the fact is that good that you had some mentors, because a lot of people do feel that they know what they're doing just by reading some kind of bulletin or just, doing a Kaplan Q Bank or a USMLE World Q Bank, and that's not enough. You need good mentors who've been through it before to let you know exactly what you're getting into. And it sounds like you knew a little bit about what you're getting into. A lot of people, unfortunately, have to explain red flags or failures on their application. And it's more because they didn't know what they were getting into. It's more important to get through all of your steps the first time, in my opinion. What do you think, Dr. Ed?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always nice to have some kind of guidance, during this whole process, preferably, within your med school, and which kind of was going to lead to my next question is, did you have like other friends, colleagues, folks, who graduated, ahead of you who were able to help you out? I mean, that's where I think the guidance would come from besides mentors.
Correct. I was very lucky to have a lot of American friends when I was doing my research fellowship. A lot of them, they were sharing their literature they use for the USMLEs, like step one and all of them. Unfortunately, I just had like two people from my country that gave me a little bit of guidance, but not as much. That's why I got so confident that because all of my friends were American graduates, that I could take all my steps in 4 weeks like they do, or like in 5 weeks, but that wasn't the case. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that every time I talk about my USMLE says everything, it's something that I always tell people, that you take them when you feel you're comfortable taking it. Even though there is a lot of people ahead of you, a lot of mentors pushing you to take it, or even some people, friends who have been through the same way. Everybody path is a friend, so just take them when you feel you're ready to take it.
Absolutely. So you must have taken this after graduation, is that right?
Okay. Yes, I graduated, and then I worked for a little bit, like for 2 months, and then I got the opportunity to do a research fellowship. And then I took my steps when I was doing all the research fellowship program.
Yeah. What about U.S. clinical experience? Was that, again, at GW? Is that, and the rotations that you did in Wisconsin, is that how you, gained the clinical experience?
Yes, my first clinical experience was GW. I was, again, lucky enough to do outpatient setting and inpatient setting for almost 1 year. Also, I went to Madison to do another rotation down there, and then I went here in Bridgeport, Connecticut, when I did an internal medicine rotation for almost 2 months.
Amazing.
So that's where I got most of my experience. But also I went back to Honduras as well to do, the clinic every 3 months or every 4 months to do the follow-ups.
Fantastic. All right. So back in September 2019, when you applied, I'm sure your personal statement would have all these, description of all your research and all the medical mission that you described about, having your pacemaker, I'm going to say pacemaker clinic in Honduras. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, I was actually something that I learned was that the more people that read your personal statement, the better. And even when your English is not your native language, always have different people to look at it, to give you advice, or just read as much as examples as you can to get a better personal statement. Because in my case, I'm terrible at writing about myself. And a lot of people used to tell me about you're not putting everything that you are in there, or you're not putting your essence as much as, I mean, you have done amazing stuff and you're not putting it in there. So you better put this, or you put this. So they helped me through some guidance.
No, I feel like this is a really good summary for people who are like, oh, I emailed 10 places for research, or I emailed 10 places and nobody got back to me. And I'm in awe of how short-sighted that is. Like you said, you can email 400 places and get 5 responses back. And you really, it's the survival of the fittest, guys. So you really need to understand that the market is saturated at this point. And until something changes, you need to do, it's like brute force, like who is going to put the most emails forward, the best follow-ups via making lists every day, and having the most positive attitude, in my opinion. And to me, like, I feel like can you share a little bit about how your English command is so good? Is it because of the exposure you had in the U.S., or is it because you went to like an English Catholic school? Because a lot of those exist in overseas, in different countries.
Yes. It actually is very interesting because I never went into a bilingual school when I was in Honduras. However, my parents put me into like private lectures when I was little. When I was like 6 years old until I was 10, they put me in English, and that was all the training that I got for English. And then all of my medical school and everything was in Spanish. And then I always liked English itself, so I like reading a lot of English literature and a lot of medicine literature. So even when I was in medical school, some of my books I used to get them like on English. And then, of course, when I came in, my exposure to the U.S. Helped me to improve my language. However, the abbreviations and all the technical things can be a challenge sometimes. But I mean, it's just take time to get there. But I think it was mainly because I was very passionate about, I like the language. So
Right.
I was always very exposed to it, either by music, by books, or by different things.
Wonderful. So Dr. Ed and I would like to learn Spanish, so maybe you can teach us,
Wonderful. I would love to.
Not myself, but my son surely would like to learn Spanish. Oh my God. Yeah.
Mine is limited to neurology Spanish.
Mm.
Oh,
That's
Fantastic.
great.
normally doing
Wonderful.
math, that's like, it's limited to what I can do in the neurological exam for Spanish. So, but this is like a really, Dr. Ed, like you picked a really good candidate. I feel like this is a very uplifting sort of person, to have in terms of someone else to kind of emulate themselves after. Um, and it really is so much about personality. I really believe, people just, when they call me and they contact me and they talk to me about, oh, look, I didn't match and I have this credential, that credential, and they just rattling off the list of credentials. And I said, like, I like the credential part, but personality is,
Yeah.
I say, half of what you're going to do. And then hard work. And then also just what you're doing in that interview. When you come across, like, you can see that this candidate has charm, and she means what she says, and she really has worked hard, and she's worked to master the things that are important to program directors. So let this serve as like a very good example of what I try to illustrate when I say that it's more than your credentials. It's some of it is charm, some of it is being able to communicate, and a lot of it's your life story and how much you've tried, you know?
Absolutely. And, I think there was like one group somewhere, where there was a discussion about this, that, hey, all this personality, all the style, personality, charm that you mentioned, I don't have that. I mean, that applicant didn't have it. So, and I've kind of basically told that person, no, I'm sure it can be learned. You're still gonna have to like try hard, and you can uh, at least kind of improve on your personality and how you interact with other folks. At least to the point of getting an interview, and I'm sure once you do that, it's just going to be there for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's go on now to program application. So you mentioned the second time you applied, and so did you apply more extensively?
Correct. The first time I applied, I actually just applied to 15 programs, 1-5. So it was limited to the area where I was doing my fellowship. And then I decided to apply broadly. I actually decided to do research in every program and actually see how compatible I am to the program. Either it's community-based, university affiliated, or just university. So I actually researched all of them and applied to all the different programs that I think I could fit into it.
And so how did you decide which programs to apply to? Was it like geography? Was it, I don't know, family or friends, or academic, community hospital?
It was more about, I went into Frida and I went to the ones who sponsor J1. I
Okay.
also decided to I personally went into every program webpage and website. So I did some research and I have like my own database of, with information about the program directors, programs emails, core values, experience, because I don't think if you are in a university or a community, I feel like at the end you do the program, right? Uh, so I was applying to everything that I felt that I was compatible with. It was either or California, or it was either Washington D.C., or it was either Texas.
Okay. All right. All right. And so after you sent in your application, at that time, were you aware of any maybe red flags in your whole CV or application that you felt, okay, this is something I'm gonna have to like talk uh, to the program director about when I go for an interview? Were you aware of anything
Yeah,
like that?
because of my step one, I passed all my steps on my first attempt, but all of them, they are below the average. There are 220, both of them. So because of that, I knew that people were going to ask about my step ones. And that was actually one of the questions that I wasn't, it took me a while actually to know how to deal with this question. I was trying to get all the research I could. I was trying to read on the internet what people use, but I couldn't find like anything. So at the end, I decided to just say the truth. I took all my steps in less than 1 month. The system was different. It was another language, and I was doing a lot of stuff. And now what I decided is like when you are doing this, if you do have one red flag, just try to address it and then try to say that what you learned from them and how you are improving yourself. That's what I learned. So for example, yes, my step one is actually not as competitive as a 260, but I improved my 2CS and I did higher performance in all the areas. So this is how I'm getting used to the system. And now my step three, I haven't taken it yet, but I started studying it already and I'm getting good score. So that's how I kind of address it. And trust me, there were like a lot of people in my interviews who asked me about my step scores. And they weren't like polite about it. They were like, why are your step one so bad? Like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. And so now Dr. Dada, you had anything to add?
I absolutely think that being realistic about your red flags is very important. If you're someone who's going to be caught off guard when they ask you about something that it's an obvious red flag, you're definitely not prepared for that interview. So I feel that this is what we work with our candidates with. Um, you, like, I'll say it again, you have very good mentors that probably prepared you for these interviews. But if you don't have the luxury of that, come to us and be honest about yourself. And sometimes that honesty pays off, like you said. You can just tell them exactly why. This is what you did. And of course, it helps in your application to have passed everything in the first try and not have an attempt. That you were doing so much, you published, and everything worked out for you. I'm so very glad for that, but for the people that it's not the case, you have to be honest with the dash of, I don't realisticness, and this is something only someone that is trained to see that is going to help you with.
Mhm.
So, Dr. Chavez, another question. Now, if you went for an interview, and I'm going to say if you were not asked about it, did you make it a point to kind of explain to them why your step one score was not where you wanted it to be, or did you just wait for them to ask you that question?
Actually, I was always afraid of it. And actually, one of my friends who were shift told me that at the end, when people end up interview, they always gather and ask you about what do you think about this applicant. And if you don't address a red flag, it will come out. And if you didn't explain it during interview, then people will wonder like what happened. What because probably the person who was interviewing didn't ask you about it, right? They didn't tell you like why is this red flag on this application. But probably someone else will wonder, even though your interviewer didn't ask you. So it will come up. So if the person who interviewed you doesn't have an answer to that, that might put you down on the rank list. So always try to address, and I try to address it, even though people weren't asking me about it, I try to address it as possible.
I have a question about that. How did you address it even if they weren't asking you about it? I'm very curious.
Yeah, like one of my interviews, one of the people asked me like what was the toughest thing that I ever encountered in my life, and then I said like not matching, and then I told myself that something I learned from not matching was that how passionate, how dedicated I was to do medicine and how to do internal medicine, and then what I was telling him that I have faced different challenges in this path, like trying to improve my step one, trying to improve my 2CK, my 2CS, and that's when I address it. Like in that moment, I said like I have faced this, I have faced these problems, but now this is the way I'm addressing it, and this is how I improve them.
Interesting. Okay, thanks for
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think, and the reason why I asked is I think that's a very I'm going to say intelligent strategy, because it kind of tells me as an interviewer that you've kind of done a little bit of self-reflection. You kind of reflected upon your shortcomings and why it happened, and how you kind of did better the next time. Like you worked on your step 2 CK and everything, and your research, and try to build up your application that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. Now tell me about okay. So you applied, you got your interviews. I hear that scheduling the interviews was kind of a nightmare. The last this residency application cycle. I mean, people would get like emails like, I don't know, at midnight or like early AM. Is that what you experienced too?
Well, actually, I was very lucky, and I got like 3 interviews in one set, so I was able to place them almost together. However, for some interviews, I was already traveling when I got them. So what I did was I had to change my plane tickets in order to get to the interview, because the dates were a little bit close, and it was a little bit messy. But at the end, I think it worked out. It's a very expensive time.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
so yeah.
Now, did you, among the interview offers that you got, how did you like line them up? Did you, start off with ones where you thought I'm going to try these programs, and then you then interviewed at the places where you really, really wanted to go, and then had some as backup? Um,
Okay. I actually every time that I got an interview, was so excited that I always put myself into mind that that was the only interview that I got, and I had to do my best on that interview. So I never lined it up and saying like, this is my favorite program, this is least favorite program. I just put them together in a more convenient fashion of, okay, this is close to this area, so I might be there when I'm traveling, so I might put it on this date. But every interview that I have, I was very grateful. I think not matching gives you that sense of it. and
okay.
and I was like, okay, I was thinking on my mind, like, this is the only interview that I got for this season, and I'm gonna try to do my best on it.
All right. All right. Now that brings us to the next topic that, I and Dr. Data kind of focus a lot about is preparing for the residency interview. So how did you prepare for that?
Okay, I get, first of all, I kind of practice with some of my American friends. I have a very good friend that she's very, she did language, and she's very good at putting things into context and into words, in a very fashionable way. So she helped me through. We did some mock interviews. I also did some mock interviews with two or three of, I could call them mentors because they helped me through this path as well. People from Madison. So I also have like feedback from them,
Very
and they
nice.
were very good feedback about it, because when you're in an interview, you kind of get lost and nervous and you block everything. So it's good to know how to answer to difficult questions and everything. So I did mock interviews. I also read some books, like getting into residency, or
Mm-hmm.
different books that you can get online for free. Um, so I read some of those when I was at the airport, and I also try to grab the best ideas from every, feedback that everybody gave me, and try to put it into words. There are like some um, general questions that they always ask you in interviews. So I have like a draft of these questions with my own history or my own words or everything. So I try to rehearse that from time to time.
Okay. And the close friend of yours that you said, who helped you out. So I'm assuming she was a resident when you did this preparations. So
Yeah,
someone who went through the process. That's what I was getting at.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a surgery resident, so she went through the process
Fantastic.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what, Dr. Data talks a lot about is that don't do mock interview with your friends or, folks who have kind of don't know about this whole interview process. Is that right, Dr. Data?
Correct.
I feel like there's a great support community out there for IMGs and FMGs, but unfortunately when you are practicing with somebody else that is in the same shoes as you, but not at the level that we are, whether it's in a training program or attending status, that you are kind of just memorizing answers that are not going to help you during the process. You have to practice with somebody who's been there or is in a program or on the other side or has been on both sides of the table, that I always like to say is going to give you the best feedback.
Absolutely. All right. Anything, Dr. Chavez, about the residency interview? Any unusual questions? Any questions that threw you off guard that you would like to share?
I think the most challenging questions that we always find out are the ethical questions, that when they put you like case scenario, like what would you do? Because sometimes it can be very subjective to person. I find those very challenging sometimes, but again, just go with your logic and whoever you are, at the end, they're going to take you for what you are. So just try to be yourself. I think that's the best advice that I can give to people. Try to address red flags because they ask you about it and they don't ask you politely. They ask you like very, in a
Yeah.
very sometimes rough way. But it was very interesting. And like that person who asked me like, why is your SIP score not 260 like that? I actually, at the beginning, I always wondered, like, I was afraid if someone would ask me that question. And when I answered him, he actually, at the end of my interview, he hugged me and he told me, like, congratulations, you have gone so far. You should be proud of yourself. So I think at the end, he actually liked my answer. So at the end, it's just like not be intimidated, whatever the word, whatever the question is.
Mm-hmm.
Let me think about anything else. I think it's just like the red flags and just like the ethical. And then they just ask you the general questions about why you want to go into internal medicine. And they review your CV and sometimes ask you about details like what have you been doing or whatever.
Absolutely. And so again, you're basically you're just trying to say that, just keep practicing and get feedback and try improving, and that really builds up your confidence when an applicant goes for the residency interview.
Correct.
Okay. All right. All right. So you did your interviews. Now comes any thank you letters that you sent out. There's always like a lot of debate whether one should do that or not.
Correct. There are some programs that I interviewed that they actually highlight the fact don't send thank you letters. So for those
Okay.
I didn't send. What I do is sometimes when I interview with people, and I actually read that, I don't remember where, but it says like when you interview with someone, always try to remember like bullet points of the interview, very specific things that you talk to that person to make it more personal. Like for example, one of my interviewing, I actually like him very much because we talk about art. He was very passionate about art and I was very passionate about art myself. So we were talking about one of our favorite painters. So when I sent him the thank you letter, I actually mentioned him like, thank you for interviewing me and blah, blah, blah. And then I mentioned like one different moment on the interview because I know they get thousands of email thank you letters. So just try to make it a little bit different, a little bit more personal. What you talk about with him that it was so different than other applicants so he can remember you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so that's just suggests a very personalized letter, and that was like your hook. I mean, that's what that's how the interviewer is going to remember you. That all right, this was the doctor who talked to me about who discussed art. I'm sure that doesn't happen very often.
Right.
All right. Rank order list. So how did you place the programs in your rank order list? I mean, again, did you prepare it based on like, okay, I want to be at a university hospital again or community hospital. I want to be in a research-based hospital, some hospital that has fellowships, or I want to stay close to family. How did you like, any strategies that you can share?
Well, actually, that was very challenging because, you always want to place the first place you think. You started like debating yourself. Should I rank it according to the place that I think I'm going to match or the place that I feel like I would love to match? Personally, every place that I interview, I really like them all. So if I match any of those programs, I will be happy about it. However, I actually ranked them according to, I asked for different advice. For example, my parents, who has been my support through this path. So I asked them, like, what do you think? Like, I mean, of course, parents always think the best of their kids and whatever. So they always think that you're going to match every single program you interview. But at the end, I decided to rank my program according to where my mentors were and to well, I have a long history at GW, so I've always been wanted to be part of it, and I feel like I've been part of it for so long. So That's why I decided to rank it first. So at the end, I decided based on my mentorship history and like my parents also wanted to rank DC as well, so they like the place.
Fantastic. And now, in your just coming back to the interviews, the book that you wrote, I saw that you are the first author in that whole in that book. Was that also, I'm sure, discussed a lot in your interviews? Is that right?
Actually, it's very surprising that nobody asked me about my book during
Huh.
my interview. But, however, one of the people that I work closely, one of the chairs, told me every time you go to your interview, bring your book and tell them and show them to them so they remember you. So I did enjoy it for all of my interviews because I hate like selling myself and saying like, hey, look, I did this. But for some people who just slightly mention like, oh, you wrote a book, tell me about it. And then I was like, yeah, I have it right here. And then I pull out my book and show it to them and tell them a little bit about the history about it. And yeah, it was very interesting. But it was so surprising that nobody actually asked me deeply detail about my book.
Yeah, fantastic. And so, I mean, it seems very much now that you're starting your residency, you're going to go into cardiology and EP forward. Is that right?
That's part of the plan, hopefully, someday.
Fantastic. Amazing. So if you had to, well, I'm very happy, you know, I and Dr. Data are very happy that you match into your program. It's your top choice program. Um, if um, if you ever had to, you know, had to go through this process again, is there anything you would do differently? You know, was there, like you mentioned, you know, maybe study, given a little bit more time for your steps? But besides that, is there anything else you would have done differently to, you know, for someone who's going to be applying for residency?
Yeah, I feel like what I have been doing differently was like when I first got here in the U.S., I was with the mentality of thinking my work would speak louder than me networking. So that's what I lost. I lost a lot of chances of actually getting involved myself into research or into publication just because networking wasn't part of my duty at that time. So I feel like that was something that I would done differently at that time, and also like I had a lot of pressure from different people for taking my steps, so I would have done that differently to just take my time and improve it as much when I felt ready. But if you ask me, I will do it all over again, like even not the matching part, because
Absolutely.
I actually learned a lot about myself too on that period, and like things that you weren't like aware of yourself, you know, like how persistent you are with things, or how can you get involved into different things. I mean, there were some times that I didn't know how to do different things on research, and I had to go into it, dive in it, and just absorb all this information just in order to get involved with the research. So I think it's a good experience.
Amazing. Very happy for you. And I think we're kind of getting close to the end of the hour. Any final words of advice for, you know, medical graduates, whether international medical graduates or U.S. medical graduates going through residency in the coming year?
Yeah. I think what you guys are doing is amazing. So always keep in mind that there's always people out there to help. That's the first thing. And second of all, just keep trying. I mean, sometimes you try and you fail, and just keep trying if that's what you want. You will find a lot of people in this path that they will tell you that you're not going to be able to do it. Like I even had different directors, different attendings, and a lot of people saying that you know, the IMGs is hard for them to match to different programs or whatever, and just keep trying and prove them that they're wrong. That's what I will encourage. If you want it, then there are ways to do it. Even though your scores are not the best, even though you don't have publications, even though you don't have letters, it's always possible to do it if you want it.
Amazing. Dr. Data, you have anything to ask?
I actually, I don't. I feel that you've summed everything up well from the perspective of the applicant. There are a lot of moving parts, and this is just one personality who has persevered in spite of not being in the country, English as a second language, and it's really inspiring, to be honest with you. And thank you for your time. And I'm sure that Dr. Ad and I will be reaching out to you periodically, so don't forget. You know, I'm the big GW resident, and you know, don't at that point try to pay it forward. This is what the way that I like to think about it is, because there's no karma like in my opinion.
Sounds good, Dr. Chavez. Well, thanks so much, and I'm sure folks from your med school are really going to look forward to speaking with you and learning more about your journey. And congratulations again on a very successful match, and all the very best to you as you start your residency.
And thank you so much for this opportunity. And feel free to reach out to me every time you need to. I'm always happy to help. Like Dr. Data said, pay forward.
Yes.
That sounds good.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Thank you.